Remember, Steelwing? Don't go to Ponyville after 9. Ponies disappear there still.
Fucking hell. Never listened to Mom all those years ago, Steel said after entering Ponyville. The place was run down, most of the buildings were collapsed, and not a single shred of life remained. The Everfree reclaimed the land, and not even the animals would dare step into the boundary of the abandoned town. Why was he here? He wanted to prove that the laughter was a myth. The bearers of the harmony died long ago, all because of an accident that discord supposedly caused. Even then, reports of ponies going missing, odd lights, and a praised laughter coming from the town can sometimes be heard. He wanted to investigate the happenings, prove them all to be myths and legends. Now here he was. He couldn't help but feel watched, like every move he made was being calculated by some outside force. That, or it could just be bad gas. He really hoped it was the latter, because if he really was being watched, he had no way of knowing it. His wings flapped nervously as he dredged onward into the center of the once prosperous town. He could only imagine what it would look like if ponies were milling about, saying hi and hello to one another. Those were the times long ago. As the mare named Pinkamena Diane Pie, or Pinkie Pie to her friends, suddenly went berserk. Her eyes went wide, her pupils nothing more than dots, her mane went straight, but what's above? Those that actually escaped had said her smile was by far the most frightening thing in the world. Not even when they had seen Nightmare Moon, or Pyric, or even Discord. They said that smile would be forever engraved into their memories. Steelwing, of course, took interest in this. He was a metal worker by day, but he was a ghost hunter by night. Well, ghost hunter isn't really exactly the right words. Monster recorder would be more accurate. He's captured Will-o'-the-Wisps on camera. He's caught the majestic Hegabrine on an expedition to the tallest mountain. He's even recorded a Bandlands death wasp mauling a Malworf. However, this will be his biggest break in his entire career. If he can get so much as one picture of Pinkie, he'll be a journalist god amongst his peers. Of course, he went against his mother's warnings that she told him when he was younger. But hey, no one said his job was safe. He was honestly afraid that taking to the skies would make him an easy target, so he tried to stay on the ground as much as he could. Of course, the flapping of his nervous wings didn't really help. He spied around a corner marketplace and saw what he was looking for. The place looked lively, even after 30 years of disrepair set in. The roof once looked like a chocolate ice cream, was now caved in. The paint was peeling outwards, and the door was a once vibrant pink, now looked like an off-white color from sun damage. He swallowed heavily and took a deep breath. He opened the door slowly at first. It squealed in protest, but the sound was eventually drowned out by the sound of a bell. A bell that would normally stop after the door was opened. However, it just kept ringing, and it rang and rang. There was no breeze. He wasn't sure how it kept on ringing. He turned away from the still ringing bell and walked forward into the lobby. He felt as if he was diving into a horror story. He walked alongside the tables, checking each one. He put a hoof on one and examined it. No dust. But how? While he began to ponder this, the bell stopped ringing. He turned around to see the bell, only there was no bell. There, even a door. His eyes widened in shock and confusion, and he looked back at the table to see a mound of dust and a rotting sponge cake on it. No. No, that wasn't. He looked back at the now doorless wall and began to walk outside. Who this? Big break or not, I'm not crazy enough to be in there. Hope the pictures of the whole town are enough. Before he even stepped hoof in Ponyville, he had taken pictures of the whole town from above and from the sides. As he began to look over them, he couldn't help but notice something was off. He looked at one of his pictures from the side, and just next to the town hall he could see it. A small pink dot. The next picture showed the dot again. The next side angle showed the dot closer now. The more pictures he flipped through, the closer it got. The second to last picture, he could just make out a face. And when he flipped to the last picture, he could see where those horrible eyes stared back at him. He dropped his camera and took a picture towards him. He grabbed it and flipped it around, intending to delete it, but he went pale. His hooves began to shake as he began to turn.
Hello.
Ah! He dropped his camera and began to run as fast as he could. He took sharp turns, crashing into things like toppled stands and trees, and finally came to a stop when he found the library. He bolted inside and slammed the door shut. He leaned back on the door, expecting banging, but nothing came. He was breathing heavily, and he gave a quick look around. Not that it did any good. It was pitch black, so he fumbled with a small lighter and flicked it on. He saw books strewn all over the place, some with pages torn out, some even burned. However, he stopped when he did hear a bang on the door. He flicked the lighter off and hid under the coffee table. When the banging stopped, he was relieved, suddenly terrified by the sound of the window being shattered. He heard her giggle as the glass crunched under her hooves.
Are we playing hide and seek? I love that game.
He held his breath when he could hear her getting closer. Crunch, crunch, crunch. And then it seemed to stop. He slowly let out a breath, trying not to make a sound. The giggling was closer now, almost on top of him. He swallowed again. Suddenly, he heard the table flipping over. The hooves just came next to his head when he heard the voice next to his ears.
Found you!
He screamed again, but this time he couldn't run. She had him pinned. Feeling for anything, his hoof tapped something. A piece of glass. He gripped it in his hooves and slammed it as hard as he could at where he thought her temple would be. What he didn't know was that she had turned her head as swing, so instead of the temple, he impaled her eye. She fell off of him, and he got up to flick his lighter on. Now that he got a good look, she was almost skin and bones. No muscle. Her mane was so long it dragged on the floor, and it was a wonder how she could even stand up with those sticks she called legs. Now, though, her head was bowed, and she ripped the glass out of her eye. Her head swayed, bowed as she grabbed at it. But now it was as if she was starting to cry. Her shoulders bobbed up and down. But then he heard not crying, but laughing. Then laughing into growling.